decided that I was going to do a video dealing with the issue of the census. And I was going to do a nice um, in-depth look at the Constitution and specifically Article 1, Section 2 and the 14th Amendment and talk about the constitutionality of the census. I'm not going to do that because I found myself in the position the media finds themselves in on occasion. I have been trumped by the president on this issue. Now, the reason this became an issue in general was that a couple of weeks ago, the Supreme Court, in a very kind of, I know kind of about it, in a very unusual decision, decided that in the case of the U.S. Department of Commerce versus New York, of course, the Secretary of Commerce is Wilbur Ross, for anybody who likes keeping track of that stuff, dealing with the census on whether they could put the issue of a question of are you a citizen of the United States in the census. Now, the weird part about this decision is the court held that though lacking neither constitutional nor any legal reason, they thought the administration's decision to include the question of citizenship for collecting data, it had been put in that it had to do with the Voter Rights Acts and enforcement of it. And they decided, the justices, that that was what they call pretextual. That means that the court held that the administration was harboring some kind of a ulterior motive or agenda, and that rendered it otherwise the constitutional little thing kind of arbitrary and capricious. Now, when I read that, if you're a fan of the DC series, The Doom Patrol, then you'll get this joke. It struck me as a real robot man moment in it, or normally what would be called, for those who don't know that series, it would be a WTF moment, because it didn't make any sense to me. I mean, Justice Roberts was, was reading the president's mind, was considering their ill intent that wasn't being displayed. This has happened before in some court cases, and I think it's amazing that I wasn't aware that our judges had the power of precognition, where they could see the future, or telepathy, so they could read people's minds. And Justice Thomas in this just raked Roberts over the coal. I mean, I'll give you a quote here. For the first time ever, the court invalidates an agency's action solely because it questions the sincerity of the agency's otherwise adequate rationale. And Justice Alito, who is he's a conservative justice, but a good justice nonetheless, he was really not happy with this decision. And no one should be, because it is a weird, arbitrary decision. He stated that the federal judiciary has no authority to stick its nose into the question of whether it is good policy to include a citizenship question on the census, or whether the reasons given by Secretary Ross for the decisions were the only real reasons. And I go, this is 100% on the mark with this, because this is the stupidest thing you ever heard of. And the issue was, since the Supreme Court said no, now you're having to deal with the idea that, does the Trump administration have enough time to actually resubmit it to the court in enough time to get it approved before the census has to be done next year? And the short answer to that is probably no. So again, what ended up happening, though, is that all this argument became rather moot, because President Trump did an end run around them and totally outfoxed them. So the Trump administration decided, as a way to circumvent the rather bizarre decision of the Supreme Court, today, which is actually it was yesterday because today's Friday, this was on Thursday, he announced that he would immediately issue an executive order to get an accurate count of all non-citizens and citizens in the United States. And he believed it'd be far more accurate than the actual census, which is true, because the census is all voluntary. When you walk up there and say, are you, what race are you? Do you live here? How many bedrooms? You don't have to answer any of it. You can say, I don't want to answer. And when people fill them out, they don't have to mark them accurately either. There's no penalty for inaccurately marking the census from an individual doing it. He decided that he would use the federal databases from all the different federal agencies. Again, this is Homeland Security. This is going to be alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. This is going to be the IRS. This is going to be the Social Security Administration, to count how many are citizens and how many are not. Obviously, INS, other agencies like that. And today, basically, let's see, Tom said, today I'm here to say that we are not backing down for our effort to determine the citizenship status of the United States population. And he slammed, of course, the far left Democrats for wanting to conceal the number of illegal aliens in the midst. And there's some truth in that. That is one of the issues on this. This is only an issue for states that have lots of illegal immigrants in them. And of course, he'll leave no stone unturned. And the simple answer was that he said it will take too long. I mean, the Supreme Court said that there really wasn't any constitutional or their legal reasons why they couldn't do this. They just doubted their intent, whatever the hell that means, and that it would take too long to go through the federal courts to get the 2020 census. So they'll just say, we'll send the census as it is, and we'll just compile the data using other resources to do it. And after Trump finished talking, the Attorney General Bill Barr came up, and let's see, his quote on that is, that information will be used for countless purposes. For example, there is a current dispute whether illegal aliens can be included in apportionment purposes. We are studying this issue. Of course, apportionment is the census counting you have to count the illegals because you count citizens and non-citizens in the United States. But the question is, if you're here illegally, are you counted for the apportionment of federal monies for the House of Representatives, which of course affects electoral votes of the state, and probably about $700 billion in federal spending. So, and of course, Barr went on to slam the media. Of course, have been saying, well, Trump's going to go ahead and do it anyway. He's going to illegally force the citizenship question in the census. And, Barr is such a cool hand Luke sort of fellow. If you haven't seen the movie, you won't get the reference. But other than that, he's pretty cool. Saying that the media was being hysterical mode of the day. And they weren't. It was never a question. They said that they were, that if the court said no, they were going to have to go do something else. And they did something far more clever, actually. So I always think people vastly underestimate the Trump administration. They have this. People who are Trump haters assume. I think it's amazing. They assume that he's a Machiavellian genius and an absolute idiot, and you can't be both. But apparently, for some reason, people think he is. But the big issue of the day, and I'll have to go through this quickly, and I'm going to clip some video in here on this, is that after this was over, the White House had held a meeting today for internet journalists, most of which, of course, are supportive of the administration. One of which was Sebastian Gorka, who used to be an advisor to the president and has a national syndicated radio show on the Salem Network, same as Rush Limbaugh, for those who care. And this was actually on. There was a desk up between Sebastian Gorka and a reporter. He's a correspondent for CNN and Playboy magazine, whose name is Brian Karem, I assume, K-R-E-M, Karem. And it ended up being a pretty nasty situation because I'm going to play you the video on this, and you can make your own decision on it, because you're going to find that it's hard to find the actual entire video. I had to look around for it. I saw it initially in the morning, didn't have any problem finding it immediately. Went to look at it a few hours later, had to really look for it to find the actual video that had all of this reporter's statements on it. And I'll let you. We'll put the video in here and let you watch, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
Sad. No, I'm just standing around. This is a group of people that are eager for demonic possession.
Demonic possession. You're a journalist, right?
That's right. Hey, come on over here and talk to me, brother. We can go outside and have a long conversation.
You're threatening me now in the White House. In the Rose Garden. You're threatening me in the Rose Garden.
Get him!
You are a punk. You're not a journalist. You're a punk.
Go home. Journalist, go home. Hey, Gorka, get a job.
You can't talk to journalists.
Hey, just for the record, he'd kick your punk ass.
Okay, now having seen the video, um, it's very interesting what had happened. I mean, this squabble had to do with this guy is been in the White House before, and he is an ass. He's been rude to people in the past, the press secretaries. He made a whole lot of, I mean, obviously made some pretty nasty comments, and that a group of people eager for demonic possession, which of course Gorka heard that and got a little pissed off about that. You're a journalist, right? Which is the whole bit. He comes up to him and uh, and I loved it. The part you couldn't find, they actually edited it out of some of the videos you couldn't find anymore, was his comment about we can go outside and have a nice long conversation. If you look at his body language, and I don't like reading people's mind, but come on, you look at his body language, the way that he said it, and his smile and his smirk, he was trying to say, I will just step outside and have a nice conversation. I've heard that. I used to work as a bouncer in a bar. I've heard that many times when people say it, and they never talk. But anyway, so and of course, it was also weird because they were already outside. So we're outside of the White House grounds, and we're going to meet at the local park and kick sand at each other or something. And Gorka just, went up to him and said, "Are you threatening me?" Which is, I mean, it was done. I had no. The implication was definitely a threat, and I love the fact that you're a punk. You're not a journalist. You're a punk. Sebastian Gorka is not a small man and has been involved in the intelligence community, and he really doesn't take crap from people. And I love this Kareem guy about, get a job and go home. And what does that mean? Since Gorka's parents were escaped from the domination of the Soviet Union, he should go home. I mean, boy, the left would have a field day if that was a Republican that said that. And get a job. He's got a nationally syndicated radio show. The best part of it, though, was one of the colleagues that was the one who actually did the video that you saw. That's why it ended up being a good one. Is that he took that Gorka would kick your punk ass, and I thought that was really funny because I had no doubt about it. Because I've seen that guy in bars when I was working as a bouncer. I mean, they're the yapping ones that do it until someone gets in their face, and he really didn't really know what to do. As long as the camera's on, he was safe. But as I've seen people like that, when you actually get the situation when you say, okay, we'll step outside, then they immediately find some reason they can't do it. I thought it was funny, though, that there had been a kind of a support for this Kareem guy until some people, the White House reporters, actually saw the full video that he had egged this situation on and created it. Of course, Jim Acosta from CNN this is the dangers that we face in the White House. And like, what a load of crap. You're not in a combat zone. Now, I'm going to play another short video here that I thought is kind of a substance on the end of it, and it deals with two social media citizen journalists. One of them is Joy Villa, and the other one is Brandon Tatum. So we'll play that video for you now.
And you just threatened Gorka just a minute ago. You told him to go outside.
I said I would talk to him. I didn't threaten.
You know what that means. Everybody knows what that means. What are you going to do?
Talk. Who are
You can talk to him right here.
I can talk.
Why would you take him
I'll
outside?
be happy to
But
talk.
this is not the fight of the
You're
kids.
not fooling anybody, man.
But I said I would talk to him. I said I would talk to him.
We all know what that means.
No, man.
Seriously, like what is going on? This is what happens when you bring influencers.
It's an embarrassment.
Yes, you
are. You say that you're a media person. You're an embarrassment. You said you were going to take him outside out front. That's exactly what you said.
This is outrageous.
Okay, now that have you looked at that video, I just as a substantiation of what was going on. Brandon Tatum used to be a cop, and I mean, if you've ever listened to his stuff, he's a conservative. He's a black conservative, obviously, and he's a good fellow. I've listened to some of his stuff in the past. I'm not really that familiar with Joe Villa, but I think I'm going to look her up. Joy Villa, excuse me, but I'm going to look her up now because I found her interesting too. And obviously, they were of the same opinion. You were trying to call him out and prove what a tough guy you are, and he called your bluff on it, and you look like a fool. And then so I go full kudos and credit for Sebastian Gorka in the idea that I think with this is an example of is that the right needs to stop apologizing every time the left says something to them. That is, when they call them a name, they say you're racist or you're a homophobe or you're, which again, phobia means an irrational fear of something. They throw the phobia on something. That would, if you were a homophobe, that means if you saw a homosexual, you would like jump up on a table and scream or run away from them as quickly as you can. Because I've seen people have arachnophobia, and it's a really scary thing. Just idiot stuff that the media has, but people who live in their own little perception of the world. And the idea that conservatives need to just stand their ground and call them the fools that they are and prove to them that they're just bullies that are yapping. So anyway, I hope you liked the video, and of course, subscribe or and recommend me to others. I can always use more people. I would like to get to enough where I have my own dedicated URL channel. So thank you kindly. We'll see you later. Bye.